Well, for more on this, I'm delighted to say we're joined by Somayya Ouazzani, live in the studio. She's the co-founder of Children Not Numbers. That's an NGO based here in the UK and also in Belgium. Somayya, thank you very much indeed for your time and for coming in to speak to us here on TRT World. The longer this conflict goes on, the harder it is to comprehend the scale of the destruction, the suffering that people in Gaza are currently going through, and particularly women and children, and that's where your charity comes in. Just tell us a little bit more about what you do and how you do it.
So we know that 40% of the casualties in Gaza are children, and in response to that, we founded Children Not Numbers because we just couldn't any longer witness what we were witnessing and the atrocities on a daily basis. And given the level of human suffering, the political will, the political response, the governmental response has just been woefully inadequate, the humanitarian response woefully inadequate. So we've ended up in a situation where organisations like ours, founded by and run by ordinary individuals, are having to provide a response on the ground. And I think this is unprecedented.
And how difficult has it been to organise a response and to get injured children out of Gaza?
So from an aid perspective, and we're not an aid agency, but we've had to pivot and provide aid, it's virtually impossible in the north. It's incredibly hard. And anything you provide is at, an incredibly inflated cost. So it makes things very inaffordable, and families go weeks on end, medics go weeks on end without any food. It's making children much more sicker than they otherwise were, and it's making it's much harder for children to recover from their injuries. In terms of medical evacuations, there has been none since the 7th of May. They've grinded to a complete halt. The coverage that this issue has had internationally, politically, it's just been astounding, the silence, really.
Where have they successfully been taken to? I mean, the UK presumably fewer. Egypt perhaps takes a decent proportion of children that are medevaced out of the territory?
So the UK hasn't taken a single injured Gazan child, unlike the 150 plus we saw with the Ukrainian war, quite rightly. Egypt has taken thousands of injured Gazans, both women, children, women, men, and that response has been, they've accommodated as they needed to, but that's a healthcare system that we've already seen is struggling to cope monumentally. We've seen some European countries come forward, Belgium, we've seen France, Spain now, Italy, Germany. They have responded and they are taking small numbers of children. But I had a meeting today which confirmed to me that potentially there would be maybe 75 places amongst all of the EU for injured children, for dying children, children with cancer. It's woefully inadequate. And
as you say, when it's compared to the Ukraine war, it is a tiny little number. Why is it so difficult to get the children out, and why has it stopped since May? You said before May that was happening.
Yeah, the political situation on the ground is catastrophic, as you know. There isn't enough political liaison, enough political coordination. There are no pathways for Gazan children and people injured from Gaza. It's not like, with other conflicts where there are properly coordinated medical evacuation pathways, where there is transparency, predictability. There is nothing like that. And that makes it really hard and very inefficient, and it costs lives every single day.
And hospitals there, we know, are barely functioning. Doctors and the amount of medical staff have been severely depleted. The whole system is creaking. Presumably that just makes the job so much harder for you, and it also leads to hundreds more, thousands more unnecessary deaths.
Absolutely. The system is on its knees. It is barely functioning, as you say. We've lost thousands of children across, since this conflict started, unnecessarily, because they're sustaining these heinous injuries and there just aren't the medical resources, expertise, equipment to support them. We've seen that with medics as well. The number of senior medics that have left Gaza or have been killed or detained is huge. It's over 550. Can you imagine if that were the case for the NHS?
What do you want Western governments, the UK government, European governments to do to make the job for you and organisations like yours a little bit easier?
Acknowledge the crisis, coordinate and assist in developing proper pathways, put the safeguarding in place, the checks, the balances in place, facilitate the transfer of children in an expeditious way, ensure that aid is coming in and out. It's not enough to rely on field hospitals. In fact, it's woefully inadequate. That's what we keep being told. It's not enough to send medical missions once a week, once every 2-3 weeks. Those medical expertise are there for 2 weeks, 10 days, and then they're gone again. And then you end up in situations where you have very junior medics who work 24-hour shifts with no pay, barely able to find food for themselves and their families, doing some of the most complicated medical interventions you can imagine. And that is costing lives too.
Of course, the situation on the ground for medics, for Palestinians, is hard to imagine. What about the psychological demands on you and the team you work with, dealing with the pain and the suffering of people when there's such a vast task ahead of you, seemingly with so little end in sight to the violence?
I mean, it is huge, actually. We've had to coordinate a wellbeing team because our caseworkers were just struggling and suffering so much. And that fact sounds, and it is difficult to talk about our own suffering, but, the vicarious trauma is real and it's really hard and it makes our work much harder to do and much harder to sustain.
And looking further ahead, do you see your organisation growing? Are you trying to attract people or work with other organisations to make this something that can get up and functioning and get more kids out of there? You said it hasn't happened so much since May. Presumably you have to stay positive and think you are making a difference.
Absolutely. I mean, as an organisation, Children Not Numbers has grown exponentially since we started. I mean, we officially registered in February. We're now over 100 people. We're made up of some of the best medics around, some of the best lawyers around, and absolutely we want to continue to do this. And we want to be there for the day after because Gaza has been decimated. There is very little semblance of normal life left there, and they are going to need an international response that is properly coordinated, well-funded, to support that.
And they are going to need people like you who've given up your job, I understand, to pursue this and to try and make a difference. Somayya, we really thank you for coming in. It's great to have you in the studio, great to talk to you, and wish you all the best with your endeavours.
Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much.